The last weekend of September, there was a new update to Insight Maker rolled out, and this update contains a new function called pause, which I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about because it's a really exciting addition to Insight Maker. This model is the standard default model that you get when you create a tell Insight Maker you want to create a new insight. Though I added to this the definition of a slider so that I could modify the rabbit birth rate for this model. And if I just run this in the default form, it runs for a period of 20 years and shows the growth of the rabbit population. With the new pause edition, there's a new field in the time settings, so I could tell this that I want this to stop every two years because that's the time units, and I apply this and run it, and now it will stop after 2 years and give me the option to modify the slider to change the birth rate, tell it to continue, and it will stop after another 2 years. If I don't want to change it, I can just tell it to continue and then change it so that you can evolve the simulation piecewise and alter the parameters that you have defined sliders for. Now, if you have a simulation and you have defined a half a dozen parameters with sliders, they would all show up in this window so that you could change them each time that it stopped. Though note that what it shows here is this is the number of time units that you want it to stop for, not the simulation step size. If I change the step size for this model to essentially a half a year, I'm still telling it to pause every 2 years. So if I run this, it still stops after 2 years, even though I told it that the step size is a half a year. The other alternative, the other option that appears available that really isn't. I have to explain that it appears available, but it's not really beneficial. Is that on the graph itself, there's a pause button, so that you can pause the run. The problem is that the simulation is already completed in the background, so all that you're pausing is the display. You can't pause the display and actually reset the parameters because it's already done. The simulation runs too fast in the background, so that while it appears that you can stop this, it's just stopping the presentation of the display. The option that is available is that you can use an action primitive and define it in such a way so that it's triggered by a condition, and the action that happens on that condition is the pause function, and the trigger value is rabbits are greater than 400. So for this particular implementation, when I run this, as soon as the population gets to be greater than 400, it stops and gives me the option to alter the birth rate. Now, if I alter the birth rate and tell it to continue, it steps one time step, because it's still, the way I defined it is if rabbits is greater than 400. So it's greater than 400, and it moves now one time step every time I click the button. So it's a way to say, here's where I want it to stop, and when I stop it, when it stops, I can alter the value, and then I can continue on an individual time step from there. One additional option that I put together, and this model is linked to the video in Sysnet, is to define a pause function the way I did in the previous model, but provide another variable with a slider that defines when I want it to pause. So I now end up with two sliders, one for the rabbit birth rate and one to tell it when I want it to pause, and the pause condition is years greater than equal to pause at, which is this variable. So I'm not testing the population, I'm telling it when I want it to pause. If I now go ahead and run this, it pauses at 2 years when I told it to, and if I now click the continue button, it will go for one time step. And the time step just happens to be a year, which was the default, so it goes for one time step. But I have the option at each pause to alter the variables. So by looking at this, I can now say, all right, I want you to pause again at time 8. So when I now click this, it will go ahead and run all the way over to 8 years, and it will pause. And I can change the birth rate and click continue, and it's going to go one time step because it's greater, the time is greater than or equal to the time I tell it to stop at. So I get one time increment. And I can now say, all right, go ahead and stop it at 14. So it will continue until it gets to 14, and at 14 I can change this value and tell it to continue. So using this approach, you can make it as granular as you want it to. So if I changed this and told it that I wanted the time step to be 0.25 every 3 months, and I run this, it still stops the first time at 2 years because that's where I told it to pause. But when I tell it to continue, it's only moving a quarter of a year. If I look at this default display, which tells me when it's, or the pause at, but it shows me the time, it's stepping one quarter each time I click this because that's the time step defined in the time settings. So I end up with it being even more granular in terms of per click, but then I see how it's going and say, okay, I want you to stop again at, run it all the way out to time 8, and it'll run. Why isn't it running out to time 8? Oh, you can't change the option over here. You have to change the one that's actually given to you in the display, because these are the options that it uses when the simulation starts. These are the options that you change during the simulation. So now I want it to pause at time 10, and it will go ahead and run over to time 10. It will stop. I can change this, and then it will step 0.25 or a quarter each time I click the button. So it ends up, you have the ability to use the pause function in a couple of different ways, and you can set up the simulation to be advanced in a couple of different ways based upon what you're seeing unfold in the model. So it sets up the option to do a whole bunch of gaming aspects based upon the feedback that you get from actually running the model. So hope this has been helpful. If you want to look at the full update for this rollout, if you just go to Sysnet, and the question always is, where is Sysnet? If you go to any place and simply search for Sysnet /Sysnet Brain, it'll come up at the top of the search. So when you go into it, if you click on Insight Maker, and here are all of the recent updates. So here's the full update that was just rolled out during the weekend. Here is the access to all of the previous newsletters, and if this pause not put in here yet, but the pause, this video and the model that I just showed you will be accessible simply by searching for pause as soon as I finish the video and get it uploaded. So hope this has been helpful. Take care. See you before long in the next video. Bye.